Hello everyone, I'm Vivek and I welcome you for our talk show Soldiers Speak with another episode where we'll be discussing about India and Indo-Pacific. The notion of Indo-Pacific has recently become widely used, particularly in the United States, Japan, India and Australia, and has almost replaced the earlier term Asia Pacific. In Russia, this change is geopolitical terminology and usually seen through the US China prism, whereas it has caught the eyes of almost all Western countries, as mentioned above. India also has a strong vision for the Indo Pacific region. So let's dig deep and try to understand the Indo Pacific in detail. To discuss on the topic, we have our esteemed panelists with us. First, I would like to welcome Lieutenant General Sanjeev Kanal. General Sanjeev Kanal, sir, is a third generation army officer commissioned in the Regiment of Artillery in 1981, an alumnus of National Defense Academy, Indian Military Academy, College of Defense Management, and the National Defense College. The general has vast command and staff experience. A qualified helicopter pilot with combat flying experience, he has been the Deputy Military Secretary of Artillery before commanding an artillery division in an area in Central Asia and the Officers Training Academy in Chennai. He has also been a United Nations observer in Angola and faculty in the Indian Military Academy and College of Defense Management. He has been conferred with the Param Vishisht Seva Medal (PVSM) in the year 2020 and the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal (AVSM) in the year 2018 by the Honorable President of India. Welcome, sir. I'm glad that you could join us for today's talk.
Thank you, Vivek. It's always a pleasure to be on this show with you.
Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to invite Colonel Ajay Singh, sir. Colonel Ajay Singh, sir, has served in Indian Army for 28 years. He retired in 2011, and since then, he has written over 200 published articles and has authored 4 books. The Battle That Shaped Indian History is his first book, which is now in the 4th edition. A Spectrum of Modern Warfare, his second book. His third book, Through Orphaned Eyes, is a historical novel that has been a national bestseller. His latest book, India's Battlefields from Kurukshetra to Balakot, covers 42 of India's battles. He writes for films and televisions and appears frequently on many shows. His 5th book, a collection of short stories, is due for release this year, and I wish him best of luck for that. Welcome, sir. So glad that you could join for today's talk.
Thank you, Vivek. As always, a pleasure being with you and Punika News, and looking forward to this episode now.
Thank you so much, sir. So, India and the Indo-Pacific, terminology known by everyone, but properly understood by very few. I would like you both to put light on it. I'll start with General Kanal, sir, you. So, India seems to be shifting focus towards the Indo-Pacific. What exactly is the area of Indo-Pacific and why it is important?
Right, Vivek. So the term Indo-Pacific was first used in the late 1920s by a German geopolitical analyst by the name of Karl Haushofer. And more recently, it was used by the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, when he came to India and addressed the Indian Parliament. And in the same year, that was in 2007. And then in the same year, there was an article published in the Strategic Analysis magazine, which is part of the IDSA, by one Mr. Khurana, where he used this term Indo-Pacific. And since 2011, it has become common parlance in the lexicon of the geopolitical circles. So what exactly is this Indo-Pacific? Simply put, it is the area, it is the maritime area which is bordered on one side by the eastern coast of Africa and other side by the Western Pacific, and all the oceans and the seas in between. The littoral states of East and West Asia are part of it. And the ASEAN countries come right in the center. Also the South China Sea. The Indo-Pacific does not include the temperate and polar regions of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, and nor does it include the tropical East Pacific. Geopolitically, it is based on the concept that the Indian and Pacific Oceans are linked strategic theaters. So this is as far as the physical dimensions or the boundaries of the Indo-Pacific are concerned. Now, why is everybody looking at the Indo-Pacific? Why is it important? That is a question which needs answering. And, more than 68% of the world's population resides in this area. And more than half the gross domestic product of the world comes from this area. So it becomes important. Also, three of the most important straits, the Malacca Straits, the Sunda Straits, and the one which is closer to Australia, which is the Lombok Strait. So Malacca, Sunda, and the Lombok Straits, they are there in this area. Most of the important sea lanes of communication pass through the Indo-Pacific. And it is estimated that more than $20 trillion worth of trade, passes through these sea lanes of communication every year. Four of the largest economies of the world, the economies of US, Japan, China, and India, they are in this area. So yeah, it is very important, and no wonder everybody is looking at it, and no wonder that people feel that the center of gravity of geopolitics in the world is slowly shifting and coming into the Indo-Pacific. And I'm sure as we go along in this program, we will discuss why people are also not just interested but also concerned about this area because of what China is doing currently. So I'll leave it at that, and the other issues we can discuss as we go along.
Right, sir. Ajay Singh, sir, anything you would like to add on?
No, I think the area of the Indo-Pacific has been described very, very adequately. Okay, in a nutshell, it covers the entire Indian Ocean and the point where the Pacific joins the Indian Ocean, covering virtually all of Asia, Australia, the east coast of Africa, and the extremities of the Pacific Ocean linking to the United States. And like somebody very correctly brought out, this is the area where the destiny of the 21st century will be decided. And that is what makes it like Europe was the area where the destiny of the world was to be decided in the 20th century. This is where the 21st century will shape itself.
Right, sir. So as General Kanal mentioned that it has become a it is of global importance, and it is a cause of concern right now what China is doing. So I would like to listen from your mouth, what have been the China's actions in the Indo-Pacific, and how does it impact India?
Okay, thank you. Very, very nice. You see, the reason why this area has got so much importance, not only economically, but because strategically, this is the area where China is doing its most muscle flexing. You take a look at, see, if you take a look at the map of the South and the East China Seas, that is where, yeah, this map, it shows China has got a line which is very nicely called the nice 9-dashed line. You can see that red line with 9 dashes. They said these are 9-dashed lines, and ye sab ilaka hamara hai. There is no historical, there is no geographical basis for the claim, but they are claiming it on basis of the fact that it belonged to the Chinese Empire in the 13th century. Very conveniently forgetting the fact that China at that time was part of Mongolia. That's a different story. Can I have that map again, please? Can you just show to me again that map, Vivek?
Yes, sir, definitely.
Right. Now, in this area is where they are claiming areas belonging to Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Brunei, Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, and so many others. They have created islands on the Spratly Islands, the Scarborough Shoals, the Paracel Islands, even the island of Senkaku in Japan, which they call Dyasu. In fact, they named the first aircraft carrier Dyasu to support their claims. These claims are what is scaring the world because economically it gives them a stranglehold of $3 trillion of wealth in that area. And also, it can, like General Kanal brought up, all the major sea lanes coming in from the Pacific are controlled by them thereafter. Now, how does it concern India? If you have a look at the next map, which is shown, the Indo-Pacific is not just the Pacific, it is also the Indian Ocean. Our concerns are Chinese I won't say encroachment, I would say the intrusions into the Indian Ocean. Look at what they're doing here. Here, they have taken over critical areas. One is Gwadar Port in Pakistan, as you know, marked in red. Hambantota Port in Sri Lanka, which they have taken over because the Sri Lankan government defaulted on the loan agreement. The Djibouti, the port in Ethiopia. Other areas in Myanmar and Bangladesh, the Seaway port in Myanmar, Chittagong, unfortunately, that project is stalled. But by coming so close into the Indian Ocean, it is a cause for concern to have a naval power so close to our waters. Hence, their activities are dangerous to us, and some feel the activities in the Indian Ocean are even more dangerous to us than the actions on our northern borders.
Right, sir. So, as we go through this, when we have seen China's development across the complete Indian Ocean, General Kanal, any additional point for the same?
Yeah, so China has been very methodically, increasing its influence in the Indian Ocean region, and India needs to be concerned about it. So, of course, lately, India has been looking at this issue very, very seriously, and it has taken certain steps. As we go along in the program, I'm sure we'll discuss this. So, yeah, China is a cause of concern, not just in the Indian Ocean, but also in the Indo-Pacific. Like Colonel Ajay brought out, its claims in the South China Sea, East China Sea, it's got a dispute with Japan, it's got a dispute with Philippines, Australia, everybody. So, and it's getting more and more belligerent, and it is showing its muscle. And the world needs to sit up and take notice of it, and plan and execute certain counterbalancing actions. So that is exactly what is happening. If you look at what is happening today in the geopolitical environment, that is exactly what is happening. Yeah.
So, sir, as you pointed out, that world should intervene and actually try to stop China. So, I would like to ask you only that the US announced a tilt in the Indo-Pacific way back in 2009 by the President Obama at that particular time, and it finally seems to be coming out with Quad. So, I would like you to put light on what is Quad and what led to the formation of Quad.
Right. So,
General Kanal.
President Obama, in the middle of his first term, he called himself the first Pacific United States president, and he was not very comfortable with the fact that the Bush administration, with their lack of focus on the Asia Pacific region. President Obama realized that the wealth of the world was slowly moving from transatlantic into the Indo-Pacific area, and he wanted that the US, not just the US, but everybody must capitalize on it. So therefore, he announced this Asia pivot policy, and it was followed up very vigorously by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also, when she made a statement saying that the United States need to look very carefully at the Asia Pacific and take proactive actions to rebalance itself in the Indo-Pacific or the Asia Pacific region. So that was the Asia pivot of President Obama. So later on, this Asia pivot was called the rebalancing of US foreign policy. But somewhere down the line in the second term of President Obama, they lost focus on this issue because too many things started happening elsewhere in the world. You know, what happened, Russia and Crimea, what happened in Syria, Afghanistan, you know, looking for Bin Laden. So all these things took away the focus of the United States foreign policy from the Indo-Pacific, and it lost steam. And then came along the administration of President Trump. Now, when President Trump came, he realized that what Obama had said was very true. And Trump was a business person. You know, he came into politics after being a very successful businessman. So he saw the opportunity in the Indo-Pacific, and so he re-energized the American focus towards the Indo-Pacific. And you know, in between 2017 and 2019, three basic foundational papers came out of the United States. One was the National Security Strategy, which claimed that China was a resurgent power. It was a revisionist power. Then in early 2019, sometime in June, the Department of Defense came out with a strategy paper which called the Indo-Pacific as a critical area of concern. And then in the later part of 2017, the US State Department came out with a paper in which they said that free, fair, and open trade is mandatory in the Indo-Pacific. So these three foundational papers actually laid the basis for the US policy towards the Indo-Pacific. The rebalancing which had commenced by President Obama was given a fillip during the Trump's administration. And so they focused on strengthening their existing relationships in this area and also forging new ones. That's where India came into the picture. And they were concerned with China's growing influence, China's growing economic power, China's growing military power. And they felt that there has to be a grouping of strong nations in this geographical area which can counterbalance China. So the United States, the Australians, the Japanese, and the Indians came together and formed the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. This dialogue was initiated, actually the idea was initiated by Japan, President Shinzo, when he had come to India in 2007 and made that address to the Indian Parliament. And so it took off. It was basically it was supposed to be just a security dialogue. And it included a very important military component, which is the Malabar exercises. More of that maybe as we go along in the show. Today, the Malabar naval exercises are into their 25th edition. The latest one is starting on Tuesday, and in the Bay of Bengal. So that is how Quad came about. Basically, some people said that it has been formed because somebody has to balance the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Somebody said that it becomes a Indo-Pacific kind of a NATO alliance, but I think that is stretching it a bit too far. But definitely it is a grouping which is to come together to counterbalance the growing influence of China in the Indo-Pacific. Definitely. So that is what is Quad. And you know, in March this year, a virtual meet was held in which Prime Minister Modi was the host, and they did not come out with anything very concrete during that summit. But definitely, it signaled to the world that the Quad is not dead, because you know, after it was initially made, Australia had left Quad for many years, and then in 2017 it came back during the ASEAN summit in Manila. So the summit in March 21 was very important, and it signaled to the world that Quad is not dead and it is very much alive. And sure enough, now in September, on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, Prime Minister Biden, Narendra Modi, and the Australian and the Japanese Prime Ministers had a face-to-face summit. And while they did not mention China anywhere in any of their statements. But definitely the presence of China as the overarching reason for Quad is always there, and nobody's getting fooled with the other announcements. Of course, very important announcements were made after the September 21 summit, basically in the fields of environment, technology, then semiconductor supply chains, vaccine diplomacy, and cyber space. So yeah, many things. And if the Quad actually starts becoming more active and collaborates and cooperates amongst each other, then I think all these initiatives which have been announced during the recent summit will be beneficial to the entire world order.
Right, sir. Well explained, of course. So, Colonel Ajay Singh, sir, like we have understood Quad, but what do you think could be the future of Quad, and what role could it play? As sir said that it is there to intervene the China's influence. So, how do you think that it could balance the China's influence?
I think General Kanal brought it up beautifully when he said, okay, China is never mentioned, but that is the reason why Quad came into being, right? And if you ask me, do you think it is here to stay? Definitely. It's here to stay with a simple reason: the Chinese are so wary about it. They keep on saying Quad is like sea foam, which will soon dissipate. They're always critical about it, right? The very fact that our leaders have met once now, just last month in person, in March in a virtual meet, and they've agreed that they shall meet regularly with the foreign secretary meeting every year, is a sign that the grouping is taking place. Where are we faltering? Where is Quad faltering? There's no charter announced. There's no fixed secretariat. There's no formal grouping has been announced as yet. What they have brought about is, which is very good, is a security architecture for the Indo-Pacific region. It is not a military architecture, right? Now, this concept of security is they cover an all-encompassing concept. Economy, and like this, there are 3 C's discussed: COVID, critical technologies, climate change. The most important C, which is of course China, was never mentioned. I'm sure that was being discussed in closed doors. But look what by having an overarching architecture, you're covering economy, sociology, everything. In this vaccine diplomacy, India is making 1.2 billion vaccine doses. The technology is being given to us by the USA. The funding is being provided by Japan, and the logistics is being done by Australia. I think it's a very good way of synergizing our efforts. We are going for critical technologies. Now look at when China, through their Huawei agency, they are infiltrating the 5G networks of all nations. We are now providing alternative to them. We are providing alternatives to Chinese Belt and Road initiatives. So, yes, Quad may evolve it into a wider alliance, into something which can be called the Asian NATO, likely. But as an idea, I think it is an idea whose time has come.
Right, sir. So, of course, Quad has shown that they are interested again, as you both mentioned. But when we talk about Quad, there is another, again, group alliance that we cannot ignore. So, General Sanjeev Kanal, sir, I would like you to put light on what of AUKUS, the new US, UK, Australia initiative. Because, again, as you said, it was always on and off. Initially, US lost focus. Now we have again come together. But there is another organization, again, alliance coming. So how will it impact Quad? And what is AUKUS, basically, the new US, UK, Australia initiative?
That's a very pertinent question which you have asked. And, 1 week before the latest summit of the heads of state of the Quad nations, on 15th of September, a trilateral security pact between the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia was announced. it took quite a few of the players and the stakeholders by surprise. So it's a security pact uh, between the three nations, as I said. Basically, by coming together, they have promised that the UK and the United States will help Australia uh, acquire anything up to 8 nuclear powered submarines. Though this is something which is not going to happen immediately, it will take a number of years, maybe a decade or more, before the nuclear powered submarines reach Australia. But nevertheless, at least the baby steps have been taken. And why does Australia need these nuclear powered submarines? Because it is having a tough time in its relationship with China. As a matter of fact, all the three nations who are part of AUKUS are miffed with China for some reason or the other. As far as the United States is concerned, it is miffed with China on a number of platforms. Though, they understand that China is trying to be the sole superpower in the world. So there is a lot of competition between the United States and China in various domains. As far as UK is concerned, they are miffed with China because of what it has done in Hong Kong. And as far as Australia is concerned, we all know how the relationships between Australia and China has gone into a downward spiral over the last 4 or 5 years. And very recently, one of the Chinese diplomats publicly actually insulted one of the ministers of the Australian government. So, yeah, so all three nations which have come together in the Security Pact are miffed with China, and so they have come together, and they want to militarily counterbalance China in the Pacific, more in the Pacific and the East and the South China Sea than in the Indian Ocean. So this is what is AUKUS. So it is a security pact. Many people feel that AUKUS shouldn't have actually come together. Quad was already there. They could have had a Quad Plus or a Quad Plus Plus. So why have another security pact? There was an article by Mr. Sanjay Baru in one of the national newspapers, which said that these three have come together because they are all English-speaking, white-skinned countries, and they have kept India and Japan out of the matrix. R. Prasannan has also said a similar thing in the week, very recently in the last issue of the week, where they have said that what was the need of AUKUS? Quad was sufficient. You could have just, like Kanal Ajay brought out, that Quad is a sort of a grouping which has to take care of the security needs of the Indo-Pacific, not just the military needs, but security needs which encompass a lot of other things. Though cosmetically in AUKUS, they have also talked about other areas of cooperation, like cyber security and extending the undersea capabilities of Australia and a few other things. But I think primarily it is a military pact, and it actually upset France a lot, because France had a deal with Australia where they were supposed to supply them conventional powered submarines. And the irony of the situation is that when France had initially offered these submarines to Australia, they had said that they will give them nuclear powered submarines. But because of the NPT, Australia wanted to be politically correct and said, no, we don't want nuclear powered submarines. Please give us conventional powered ones. But with the foresight that when these come from France, at a later date, maybe Australia can convert these conventional submarines into nuclear powered ones. So France got very miffed because it lost a deal worth nearly $42 billion, which was nearly done. And then suddenly the carpet was swept away from under their feet. And as a reaction, France then recalled its ambassadors to the UK and to Australia. So all this happened. But the long and short of it is that AUKUS is there. AUKUS is here to stay. And whether it is good or bad for Quad is a matter for discussion. Vivek?
Right, sir. So I'll continue with where you left. So, Colonel Ajay Singh, sir, again, this will strengthen or weaken Quad, what sir said as last statement. So, will AUKUS strengthen Quad or weaken it? And we also have the Malabar series of naval exercises as they have in AUKUS. how does this help our security in the Indo-Pacific?
Very, very good. Thank you. I think AUKUS is a damn good idea because it'll strengthen Quad. Remember one thing, Quad is a security alliance, and none of the nations initially are willing to go in for the military alliance. At this point of time, I think that's the right step, even for India. AUKUS is the first step of US having bases in Australia, which is very good for our own security. So the security component of Quad is complemented by an overt military component of AUKUS. So I think it's very good for us. Secondly, in the present form, what is AUKUS? It is 8 nuclear submarines being given to Australia over a period of 10 years. I mean, 2040, they will be coming across there. We will increase the patrolling capabilities, etc., etc., etc. Right. India, Japan, Australia, and US are already conducting the Malabar exercises every year for the past 25 years. Now, you must remember the weak link in Quad, especially as far as these goes, was India. We were seen to be the one which were pussyfooting. We were not keen. We didn't want to antagonize China. And only after the action in Ladakh, when all the gloves were off, when we went all over. Okay, we invited Australia. We had a proper exercises. Besides these four nations, we're exercising with UK independently, France independently, and also with bilaterally with the USA as well. If you take a look at it, I think Quad AUKUS is all going to merge in the long term to include the nations of the European Union. Because as General Kanal brought right in the beginning, the Indo-Pacific is the area of key decision of the 21st century. So Quad and AUKUS complement each other. And the way I look at it, their roles will overlap. They may not be overtly militarily all right, but the role of providing a security counterbalance to China will remain constant.
Right. So yes, as you are saying, of course, it will strengthen Quad. Uh, General
Uh-huh.
Kanal, sir, your viewpoint on this, please.
I agree entirely with what Ajay is saying.
Uh,
That it will strengthen Quad, and it helps India in a way because India has always been very very soft as far as China is concerned, at least when it's making its diplomatic statements. And very recently, also the External Affairs Minister, when he has delivered an address, he has said that the Quad is not against any one nation. It is to strengthen the Indo-Pacific. It is for regional cooperation and mutual benefit for all. Also, the ASEAN nations, which are central to the Asia, to the Indo-Pacific, uh, many of them have been bankrolled by the Chinese, and because of that, they don't want to make any public comments against China. They don't want to go militarily against China. So, in a way, AUKUS is very good because AUKUS keeps them out of the matrix, while ASEAN is central to Quad, but it is not central to AUKUS. So it helps them also to maintain a very good bilateral relationship with China, and at the same time have a strong presence of UK, US, and Australia backing them in case of any problems. So I think overall it's a good deal. But of course, that viewpoint that why could Quad not have been made into Quad plus plus, that will remain, and it is a matter of debate because every coin has two sides. So that's how I look at it.
there's one
Right,
more
sir.
one more thing we can use even better. Like it was bought out now. France is very peeved because they had got a $46 billion deal for 12 diesel electric submarines which were scuttled. Right? It's not the amount, it's about 20,000 jobs which are at stake.
Yeah.
India can capitalize on that, all right. For all we know, we may get, if not 12, 6 or some that shark fin barracuda submarines which are doing, which is very good for Indian waters. It could
Oh yes.
be coming our way. Plus, Quad Plus, which General Kanal bought out, as he mentioned, he's right. Quad need not be just Quad. It will expand in role of Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, Singapore, you name it. they can join into the fold. And the more that comes into the fold, the stronger will the alliance be. And I actually, yeah, AUKUS, I would feel keep it separate. It's a good military alliance between these three nations. In the present form, it's got just that submarine component and obviously leading to bases at a later juncture. But now the security architecture which Quad has developed is very subtle, and we will never say it's against any one nation because it is not. But within this framework, yeah, we can encompass virtually the entire region and the European Union as well.
Okay. So, General Kanal, sir, do you feel that our own tilt towards the Indo-Pacific is in keeping with our strategic interests, especially in the light of what is happening in the neighborhood? Maybe the previous topic that we discussed about China, Taliban, everything. So do you think it is keeping our interest?
Well, Vivek, for far too long, India has focused its attention only on its western and its northern borders. It has ignored the Indian Ocean region for far too long. And now I think it's time that we start looking there, and the people who are in control and who are responsible are doing that. Otherwise, for decades, India was looking only at our western neighbor and our northern neighbor. And now, especially once the US has withdrawn from Afghanistan, and there is a vacuum of strategic leadership there. Economically, the Taliban, which is now in control of that country, is absolutely like a pauper. They have no money. Their assets are frozen. There have been so many sanctions on them. They have been appealing to the world community that please, remove these sanctions, unfreeze our assets. But people aren't doing that. And nobody's stepping forward to take a leadership role there. Nobody's recognized the Taliban government. So that space is there for the taking. And if China actually comes in there, and with the collusion of Pakistan, then it is a big problem for India. It is a big problem for India. And so that is one aspect. The other aspect is that, like in the beginning, Colonel Ajay brought up that slowly and steadily, China has been increasing its footprint in the Indian Ocean region. He named those places, Hambantota, Gwadar, and many other small bases. So we've all heard about the string of pearls theory of China, where it is, slowly encircling the Indian peninsula from the south in the Indian Ocean. India needs to take cognizance of that and take steps to counterbalance that. Many mistakes have been made, especially in the Hambantota port. India could have got that actually. And today, because of what has happened and because the economic condition of Sri Lanka is not so good, China has taken that port on a 99-year lease. So now what? The Chinese are a few hundred nautical miles away from our southern tip, which is not good news for India as far as security is concerned. Imagine India is the only country which has an ocean named after it, the Indian Ocean. There is no other country in this world which has an ocean named after it. And we had an ocean named after us, and we were not exercising our influence there. So yes, definitely now is the time to girdle up and take concrete steps and proactive steps to increase our influence in this area. And that is how Quad is going to help us. That is how Quad is going to help us. Because while we wish to do it, we want to become a international player of repute. We are a growing economy. We are a very large military power. But technically, technologically, we still have a lot to achieve. And when we are now aligned with United States, Japan, and Australia in the Quad, then that technological heft and also a military heft to some extent will come our way. And we can then exercise our rightful place in the geopolitics and the geoeconomics of this area. So yeah, high time that we do this. And I'm glad to see that it is happening.
Right, sir. And as you mentioned that, of course, Quad will be beneficial for this. So, Colonel Ajay Singh, sir, what more can be done to preserve our interest in this region?
Okay, I think it was beautifully brought out by General Kanal. He said that geostrategic and geoeconomic interests. Quad helps us in both. But one thing, we are all very excited about Quad. But I think it is why we should embrace it all wholeheartedly. I'm really happy, like that this government has gone all out and said, okay, we are taking it on and we have embraced the idea fully. But it must be with a little pinch of salt. Remember, we cannot put all our eggs in the US basket. Unfortunately, they've not proved themselves to be very reliable allies. In fact, the Russians were very good allies in 71. I do not think the US will push their weight so far to help a friend. So, follow this alliance. But at the same time, our own alliance and interests must be kept afloat. We have to have independent alliances with France, with Japan, with the stronger Australia, bilateral ones. We have even Russia. We have to have our talks going with China. That has to continue. And also, remember, we are projecting towards the Indo-Pacific to, in a way, to strengthen the US strategic interest there. We definitely need something in our strategic concerns, our prime strategic concerns are to the West. And today we are ringed by Afghanistan, Pakistan, China on the north, Iran, which is falling into the Chinese sway. So are the other nations in the neighborhood. Myanmar is also coming under their sway. To break out of that encirclement, which I see coming on land, we are moving to opening of maritime borders. But the US and the other nations must be sensitive to our strategic concerns on our western flank as well. The US has not done so by its preemptive withdrawal from Afghanistan. So perhaps a little bit more give and take should be given so that the strategic interests of our nations are looked after. Otherwise, yes, go ahead with Quad. Even I would say go to the extent, pursue the policy of developing into an Asian NATO. It would be wonderful if it comes along that lines. Yes, it would give a very good umbrella to the region. But our independent alliances, our independent strategic thinking must never be lost sight of. And we must also remember one thing, when push comes to shove, none of the alliances are going to be by our side. We will have to cater on the threats on our own. A skirmish on our western borders or our northern borders is not going to draw anybody else. That capability must always be maintained and never be lost sight of.
Right, sir. So, yes, thank you so much for all the inputs. To summarize, of course, Indo-Pacific is one of the routes where more than 67% of trade is being done. Again, largest economies are at the boundaries. And yes, there are threats, but we have alliances like Quad to strengthen it. The newly formed AUKUS is adding on to the Quad. And yes, India should increase its focus towards Indo-Pacific so that in future it can have upper hand in the global participation in form of economy, in form of politics and everything. Please add on if I missed any point.
No, I think
Well,
Vivek, you summarized it very well. But I just wanted to, I just want to compliment Colonel Ajay the way he has actually laid out a roadmap for what should be our future strategy. I think that that element of independence in looking after our northern and our western borders, I think is very important, and we all must take note of it. And as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned, I think there are two nations with whom we must develop stronger ties. One is Vietnam. Vietnam has been a very strong nation in this region, and also Indonesia. So, because if you look at history, I think both these nations are ones which have the spine to stand up and fight, and take on pressures. And so India needs to develop its bilateral and trilateral relationships with them. So yeah, both the points brought out by Colonel Ajay are very relevant in our
and
future roadmap.
plus Japan, which I think will be the greatest Asian alliance because both
Yes.
have the common enemy. That is going to be the alliance. In fact, I would actually put the Indo-Japanese alliance as even more vital than bilateral and multilateral alliances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, sir. Again, lots of things to discuss more, and we'll take that in the future episodes. For today, I thank both of you for your valuable time and all the inputs that you have provided so far. I think all our viewers would have be much aware about what Indo-Pacific region is. Thank you so much for your time and guidance. Thank you so much, sir.
Most welcome, Vivek. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. It's been a pleasure, like it always is.
Thank you, sir.